So Emil already explained you the reasons why CAMSE initiated this project and what their main focus was in writing out this tendering procedure. I'm going to explain you a little bit why we, as a participant, decided to join and to enter our offer. So I'm part of an engineering office called Streng-th. We do structural calculations, and we all are already a business resident here at CAMSE in the office center, the Basis. And we are now here located for about 6 years, and it became time to find a place of our own. And we all were already thinking of building something here on the site because we really like it here. And then when this project came on our radar, we got intrigued. We thought it could be an opportunity. And when we started talking with our friends, entrepreneurs, then we saw that there was a momentum to do something together. So we have URBCON from contractor Benens, who is not so far away, who was intrigued by the concept of the circular tendering procedure. And also it's a building site which is really close to his company, so that also brings opportunities. We have Sarah Deus, who is an architect and was thinking of expanding her business, which then required a larger office space. And then we have another business resident here at the Basis, 10 agency, who is in product development, and who are always expanding their business, and especially in the circular development, they wanted to do something more. So we joined forces, we talked about it, and then we decided that it was the right time to do something in this project. Now there are some challenges, you can see on the classic tendering, the main drivers of classic tendering is price. It's an important driver, maybe the most important driver in classic tendering, that it's price driven. It's not the cheapest who wins, it's not the most expensive who wins, but price is an important driver. And it always comes down to the price. The solution is also important, but price will be the main criteria. And that's something that blocks you in some ways. Also, classic tenders are late in every possible way that you can think of. The timing for entering your offer is limited. You're under enormous time pressure to come up with a solution and have the exact numbers. Most of the time you're based on old numbers because what you're trying to build is something new. You can base yourself on data that you have from previous projects, but they are not always that accurate, especially when you have changing business, like for instance in this Corona era, the suppliers are under enormous pressure. There are hypes, there are trends. Markets change, resources, pricing changes. The cost of labor is very important in our region, so that's also something which can eat up your margin very quickly. And of course, the cheapest offer is hardly the most sustainable. If you want to build an office very cheap, then you will probably have huge costs in using and maintaining it. And that's something that we wanted to get away of. And then a final thing that I wanted to highlight is the fight versus collaboration. There are companies who, when in a classic tendering, always try to find the latest or the last loophole in the project demands to exploit them and to come up ahead. Even when they are not awarded as winner, they will start attacking the winner and try to disqualify them or get compensated for things which are missing in the project amounts. That's very time consuming. It drains your energy. It squanders your money. It's an adventure where there are no winners, and that's what we really liked in this tendering, that you could go into a dialogue. So why did we do it then? Well, first of all, the DBFME principle, we could come up with a solution that suits us and fits the purpose. That's something very important, which is financed, which is maintainable by ourselves, and where we have control over the energy. That's a very important one. Also, the fact that there is a fixed budget. We have 1 million euros in CapEx, which means that whatever solution that you come up with, it's always for that million euros. To be clear, this million euros is the part of Camp C, which is in the project demands. I will elaborate a little bit further on that later on. The fact that it's it's already getting the stamp of the most circular office building in the Benelux will automatically draw the attention to you as a participant in the tendering office. So that's already a marketing gain. But if you are awarded as winner, then you will be highlighted even more, and that can lead to additional business. In the project demands, Camp C demanded for 100 seats, workplaces of different variety or different configuration for different scenarios. So that's also something where we could come up with a very nice solution. There was a demand or a parallel demand to provide 1,000 square meters of floor, but that was not a primary demand. The seats were driving, and the square meters were more or less linked to the number of seats. And there is, of course, the 20-year heating, cooling, energy, and maintenance demand that we had to meet. Also there are some opportunities to shift some of the costs which are needed for the build into a long-term investment in services. Okay, next slide. On the one hand here, this is a very interesting adventure where we dove into. On the other hand, there are always fears. You can be very eager to start, but is the feasibility, is that okay? Can our consortium, can it cope with the demand ahead? We're about 7 companies in the consortium, all not that big companies, but of course, can we cope? Do we have the solutions in house, or do we need to find other partners to help us find the ultimate design? Can we finance it? I already mentioned that there was 1 million euros for about 1,000 square meters in the demand, meeting 100 seats. It's not a tight budget, it's an unrealistic budget. If you look at other similar office buildings, the price per square meter is much higher than this. Is this a problem? No, it's a challenge to push our limits as far as possible, to find different ways, maybe even invest some money of our own to make the puzzle fully completed. But it's a challenge. Before we started, it was a real challenge, but nevertheless, we decided to go ahead. Composition of our consortium. So I already mentioned the architect, we ourselves as engineering officers, the contractor, and then colleague company here at the basis, then Beneden, Streng-th, and West. Those were the 4 which wanted to take the lead, but we needed some additional expertise. We already had contact with Interreg, who are a supplier of heating and cooling. So for the HVAC, they were the preferred partner to take along. Lighting is also a service that we wanted to implement. We haven't decided on which party that we are going to select. So they're not a primary consortium member, but still it's an important party. Muurtuin, who is delivering green walls, and the Shell Foundation did want to participate, as well as VITO, which is the Flemish Institute for Technological Development, who have a lot of expertise in the entire circular business model, circular building techniques, etc. So we thought this was the ideal group to get started. Now, if you take different companies in a consortium, if you join forces, then of course every organization has its own methodology, its own way of working. We wanted to avoid quarrels right from the beginning, or even worst case halfway during the project. You can only avoid quarrels if you have a book of rules, if you have a good playbook which states what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and what will be the deliverable that you're aiming for. So we agreed on clearly state our expectations for each of the partners right from the start, and declare all the spent time during the preparation of the offer. There was in the demand or in the entire tendering project, there was a consolidation price for the second and the third runners-up. And we decided to just register or declare our spent time and then split the consolidation price pro rata the spent time when we would not be awarded winner. When we did be awarded winner, then we would just put all the hours of spent time together and then forget it, and then make a new contract, in fact, for the next phase of the collaboration, the detailing of the project. And it worked really fine this way. Then once you start this project, we already found out some opportunities which also decided on whether we would not participate in the project or not. And one of those opportunities is the lease concept here at the site. So it's impossible to buy land at this site. You can lease it, and it's for 33, 66, or 99 years. So it's a long-term lease. And of course, when you can take advantage of this lease concept and you don't have to pay for the land you're building on, then this frees up additional budget for the building itself. And that's a very interesting concept. Even when the budget is not that tight as it was, it can still make your solution better with the budget that you can spend. For different consortium members, of course, it was an opportunity to locate themselves or their offices here at a very inspiring site, which is surrounded by nature. It's a very peaceful place, and it brings a lot of inspiration to the people who work here. We also decided to go for a radical new concept for this building. I will talk about it later a little bit more. And yeah, of course, if you can add strength, then it's not just a 1 + 1 = 2. We wanted to go further than just collaborate. We wanted to push each of the consortium members to come up with radical new ideas and finalize with a brand new design. The demand was for an office building, 1,000 square meters, 100 seats. But we wanted to go a little bit further because we wanted to be co-owner of the office building. Now we thought of, well, why not just add 1,000 square meters as a surplus and make the office building a little bit bigger so that the overall cost per square meter could drop. And even that was not enough for us. We already thought about a phase 3 and 4. So not only phase 1 for Camp C, but phase 2 for ourselves, and phase 3 and 4 were in fact in our solution. Now, if you want to be awarded winner, then you have to excel. You have to be radically different than the other ones. You have to have unique solutions. And in circularity, often the construct, deconstruct, and reconstruct is already enough. It was not enough for us. We wanted to push the envelope. We really wanted to prove that we could deconstruct our building and reconstruct it at the same location, or even create something completely different with the materials that were deconstructed. That was the conditio sine qua non, the absolute minimum that we wanted to achieve. Of course, building CO2 lean is a no-brainer. It's something that you have to do. And to be able to control and to get a full history of all the building objects in our building and to have a good oversight of all the resources that we have, we will come up with a kind of material depot, which we called the Depot 2.0, where we will manage and keep track of all the building resources in our office building. Well, energy and telecom are in most cases no-brainers. It's you choose a supplier, you pay a monthly fee, and then you get your energy or your telecom service. Those are the easy ones. Heating and cooling is a little bit more different because there you have a hardware cost, which is considerable, especially if you go for heat pumps, etc. So how to take those initial costs into account. Lighting is also an important one. You need lighting in your office building, but do we really need to buy all those lights? And would it even be possible to consider our facades as a service? Services, you can look at them in two different ways. You can, or a supplier can just take the initial cost of the build and then write it off over a period of 20 years. And then at the end of the period, just hand it over for a symbolic €1. That's not the way that we consider services to be implemented in our solution. We want a service provider to really provide services. That means that he has to come up with the best solution which is on the market to date. And this solution has to evolve over time. If he can find a better technology which will reduce his maintenance costs, then it's good for him to implement it. But at the same time, it should be a win-win. We should get some additional value at that point. Or even if he can provide more value for the same money, or even additional features overall, then maybe we will even be willing to pay them a little bit more. So it's really a service provider. Consider it like your telecom provider. During time, you will get more bandwidth for the same amount of money, but sometimes they will ask you a little bit more money to improve their network as well. So that's the way we want to deal with heating, cooling, lighting, facades. Maybe other things will come up. Then okay, what were the things that we did in the pre-awarding phase? The dialogue meetings, Emil already talked about it. During the dialogue meetings, only limited changes were allowed. But after being awarded, and we were the winners, you can see all the participants on the picture. After being awarded, all options are open again. You start not with a clean sheet because the entered design will be leading, but we had the opportunity to tailor the building more to the end user, which is CAMC on the one side and ourselves as co-users on the other side. And we really pushed the envelope because a lot of topics came up during these latest few months, which we hadn't thought of, legal issues, how to deal with financing, our organizations ready to help us out. Can we keep the budget under control? Really, the world was not ready for us, but we are slowly making progress. I just added here the timeline. I'm not going into all the details, but you can see that Q2 of last year was primarily focused on tendering and on the first dialogue round. In Q3, we had the second dialogue round where we already fine-tuned our initial design a little bit and got the opportunity to ask more questions. And then in Q4 of last year and the beginning of this year, it was the final submission of the offer, and then the pre-selection, the jury, where we had to do a presentation where the winner was communicated, and then after a waiting period was finally approved. In 2020, we're focusing more on the detailing of the building, the different parts, materials, building permit, which has been entered just today, and which will take a couple of months to be approved. And this time we will use to decide more on the HVAC systems, on the interior, on the materials which we will use to meet the criteria for the full circular approach of the building. We hope to have our building permit ready by the end of this year, maybe beginning of next year. And then in Q2, we will start maybe even Q1 we will do the foundations and start with the prefabrication of the timber structure. Probably the building will be erected in Q2, and then we have Q3 and Q4 to do the finishing, facades, interior, decorating, and the moving. And we hope to open in 2022. This was a brief sketch, schematics of what we entered into the concept. And you can see here in the left-hand top corner, Unit A was what we needed to provide, and we decided to make it Unit A and B. C is then top left corner, and D is bottom left corner. We really want to make a circular master plan where we now erect A and B, then in a couple of years build C. And before we start building Block D, we will deconstruct Block A and use those materials to build Block D as a real proof of concept that we can construct and deconstruct and reuse materials at the same location. And then in a later phase, you can reuse this concept and reuse even materials on different locations. So the proof of the concept is really in eating the pudding. That's what we are going to do, and that's mainly one of the reasons why we also got awarded this project. That's more or less it. I'm going to do one more thing, and that's show you the video, but the video starts really slow. I don't know why. anyway, it shows you a little bit how we envisioned the master plan of the site here at Camp C. And if you have questions, then I'm ready to answer.
Thank you, Stefan, for your story. So, Anna, can you see if we have any questions in the Q&A box, please?
Yes, we have no new questions about Centrum, but I suppose people are still typing their questions. But we have a question from Ger van der Sande, more general about the concrete in the project. Ger, maybe you want to take the floor yourself?
I think that's not possible.
Okay. So his first question was, how is reinforcement considered in the program of the URBCON project, I think, especially for structural concrete? So what about the reinforcement of the concrete?
Yeah, maybe I'll take this question since it's more a technical one.
Yeah.
So yeah, compatibility with reinforcement with the steel is of course very important, and it is also being heavily researched by the TU Delft and the University of Ghent. So tests like chloride ingress or comminutation, which basically turn the concrete more acid over time, which then could possibly corrode the steel. All of these things are of course also being looked into for this new type of concrete. For the Camp C demonstrator specifically, no steel reinforcement is foreseen, because we also want it to be easily recycled once that the lifetime of the foundation is up. So firstly, of course, we want the foundation to also be used. You saw this in the video as well, that part of the building will be demolished after 10 years and rebuilt on site again. Also for the foundation, this is the case. So the foundations will also be picked up from the ground and reinstalled later on. But at the end of life, yeah, we want to be able to easily recycle it. And if there is steel inside, that's not always the case. But in the other demonstrators, in Ghent, for example, the staircase, yeah, that is of course steel reinforced. And for that, we are doing all the necessary tests to prove that the compatibility is there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see that you normally you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to. Otherwise, I go to your next question.
Yes, he can speak right now, I think.
Okay. Yeah, can we hear you?
He is unmuted, but we are not hearing him. Okay, maybe you should read his questions then, Anna.
I read it. So his second question was also very interesting. In the Netherlands, a proven solution is to reduce the amount of concrete, like in structural floors, reducing the total building weight and CO2 emissions by more than 50%. For acoustical, fireproofing and thermal mass, there are no barriers in performance and in economics. Reduction of raw materials and longer building lifetime are main tasks. Is this considered in the program of the project, the URBCON project?
Well, yeah, so I totally follow the thinking there, using the right concrete and using the right amount of concrete for the right application. So that's definitely something that is contributing to a more sustainable way of building. If we can just use the amount of concrete that is needed, or we go up a strength class, and as such we can reduce some of the volume, yeah, that works in every way. To the sustainability, and also of course to the use of raw materials and the CO2 related to those materials. It is not something that we in URBCON specifically target to do. We mainly aim to make new types of concrete with a more sustainable nature, but it still goes hand in hand with this way of thinking, and that is something that I think, yeah, the entire consortium, because we are in it to be more sustainable. That is of course something that we take into account when we are developing these demonstrators, but it's not a specific task at hand. Although one of the mission statements is to use as little as raw materials or primary raw materials as possible, so it goes a little bit hand in hand. And longer building life, yeah, sustainability, durability, that's what we're after. And we want to make concrete that lasts as long as possible and hopefully even longer than the concretes being used today.
Okay, thank you, Wouter. We have a new question from Jan van Weert. I will just read it up loud. Okay, there is use of circular building materials for the construction of the C building. I suppose it is Centrum, the circular building of Camp C. But in what way was a new way of construction considered? As the movie shows a traditional way of load-bearing columns and beams, I hereby think of a more innovative approach. Stefan, can you answer this one?
Well, it's something that we discussed for a long time, whether we should go and find already available materials on the market, whether we should use new materials. And in all the discussions and all the different approaches that we investigated, we clearly put forward this material depot 2.0. We also decided in creating a grid of 5 by 5, which we would not only use for block A and B, but also for C and D. And the advantage of using a grid with load-bearing elements on the grid is that your dimensions are fixed, and that if you use the same grid on a different location, that you could easily reuse those elements without having to modify them considerably. Now, why the grid 5 by 5 meters? Because that, if you look at timber, and that was our primary goal, we wanted to use as less concrete as possible, just because of the CO2 emissions. Timber is a much more sustainable building material than concrete or steel or whatever. So that was our primary goal. By using timber building elements and using a grid 5 by 5, then you get an optimal use of material for the span that you want to achieve. Now, why new materials? Well, if we would have to search the market for available materials, then we would either have to invest already now in getting those materials and stacking them in our depot without being sure that we were awarded as winner, or depend on what is available on the market at the time that we are going to build. The depot is also very important because we want to track down the history, not only the quality of the building elements, but also the load history of those elements. If you take whatever steel beam on the market, then you're pretty sure what this steel beam is capable of. If it has been deformed in a plastic way, then you will see it. But for concrete elements, for timber elements, it's much more difficult to judge on the quality of an available, readily available material. And that's why we decided to go for A and B, to use new elements, where we would have a zero status of the element when we include it in the building, and where we can track the history of that element. And once it's ready for the depot and being presented for reuse, then we can certify the status of that object. Now, think of more innovative approaches. Those passed on our radar, but here the budget was tight. I already spoke about the more or less unrealistic square meter price that we had to find a solution for. And if you go for very innovative approaches, very innovative materials, or constructing very large spans, then you're blocked in other ways. We focused on a very open space in the building, so that we were very flexible in how to split it up into different areas for the different co-users, and that got the upper hand. So that's the reason why new materials, because of the history tracking that we want to do. 5 by 5 meter grid, because that's the most optimal distance for timber beams when you look at performance versus material use. and the classic way of load-bearing columns and beams because of the budget and the flexibility inside. What happens with Block C is a very different thing, because Block C is something for the future and is not linked to the budget in this tendering procedure. So there we have much more flexibility. There we'll maybe use different techniques, but at that time we will need to find the financing for that type of project as well. So I hope that more or less answers the question.
Yeah, Jan, I see Jan van Weert has a new question, but yeah, maybe it's interesting to ask this one too, because it's about something you thought about. Did you consider LVL or CLT concerning bigger spans?
Well, the CLT will be used. We use CLT walls and CLT floor elements. But again, if you use bigger spans, then your cross-section for the floor elements will be bigger as well. And we really wanted to optimize the free space inside the building, and yeah, versus the performance that it brings. Yeah, that's a decision that we made. But CLT, so it's laminated timber beams and columns for the load-bearing structure, CLT floor types, and also CLT wall elements to create shear walls and cope with the lateral stability of the building. I also see a question about the aspect of circularity.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this one. Yeah, you can answer that one too. So I read it loud. How was the aspect of circularity rated, as there are not a lot of tools for this moment to measure it in an objective way?
Yeah.
Interesting question.
The topic of the tools and the available certificates or ratings came up. We will, of course, see how our building performs in the different tools, but we do not want to just measure our building within one certain aspect. Maybe we will come up in the future with a tool of our own based upon our experiences. But one of the things that we noticed when doing research for this offer that we made is that there are a lot of use cases now which are coming into media, social media, newsletters, etc., which pretend to be very circular buildings. But once you dig a little bit deeper into those stories, then the balloon pops very easily. They use one or two circular aspects, and then that makes their building very circular. We are inventorizing all those, let's say, missing features or things, and we want to at least cover all those missing features of the other buildings and to do better. We really want to go for a full circular approach. And then we'll see whether or not we will apply for a certain certificate or a rating, or maybe and that's the primary goal, maybe our building will become the standard, and where other buildings can relate to. We can be a little bit, let's say, optimistic.
Okay, thank you. Emil, do you want to add something maybe to this question?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm not able to put my video on, but it's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, we deliberately chose not to prescribe any specific tools because, well, like Stefan also said, there's a big jungle of these tools. They all have their deficits, and we didn't want to distract the attention. We rather made our own judgment, and as I briefly showed, we had about 40% of our judgments based on the circularity aspect, and beneath this whole thing is a very elaborate evaluation matrix rating different aspects of circularity, and the candidates needed to provide us with their own deliverables on these different aspects. So yeah, we did consider it, but we did it more in a quantitative way ourselves. And we hope to be able to publish all our documents soon, so you can have a look into that.
Okay.
Does that cover your question, Jan and Sophie? I see you're unmuted now.
Yes, it does, but it would be very interesting to see the documents because as a government, it's sometimes difficult to have objective rules to arrange the candidates.
Yeah, that's why we did this, and we aim to publish every document we produced. At first in Dutch, and then we hope to find the opportunity to also translate them and spread them out even further. So you can always email us, and we can provide you with what we already have.